Hey, dear restless mind, tonight. We travel back to the windswept shores of Scandinavia, where the year is 893 AD, and the air smells of salt, wood smoke, and something sharply chemical that burns your nostrils. You stand at the edge of a Norse settlement in what will someday be called Denmark, watching figures move through the morning mist. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer echoes across the fjord. Children chase geese between longhouses while women stir great iron pots over open flames. But something catches your eye. A young woman sits on a wooden stool outside her home, her head tilted back while another woman applies a thick, steaming paste to her hair. The smell hits you like a punch. It is caustic, almost industrial, and the seated woman winces as the mixture makes contact with her scalp. This is not a relaxing spa treatment. This is Viking beauty, and you probably would not survive a single session without crying for your modern conditioner. Before we journey deeper into this world of strange beauty rituals, do me a small favour. If you find yourself fascinated by how far humans will go for beauty, hit that subscribe button and let the algorithm know we appreciate the weird corners of history together. Now picture yourself settling into your bed as we explore what these Norse warriors considered gorgeous. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight and what time it is there. Are you a night owl in Oslo, a sleepy soul in Seattle, a midnight wanderer in Melbourne? I want to imagine this little community of restless minds scattered across the globe, all drifting off to tales of Viking vanity. Now, close your eyes halfway, let your breathing slow, and let the sounds of that ancient settlement wash over you as we step fully into this world of braids, bleach, and burning ambition for beauty. You watch that woman on the stool grip the wooden edges tighter as the paste begins its work. Her companion, an older woman with silver-streaked braids cascading past her waist, works methodically, section by section. The mixture they use is not some gentle herbal rinse from a modern organic boutique. This is lye soap, a harsh alkaline substance made from wood ash and animal fat that can strip the colour from hair and the skin from your scalp if you leave it on too long. Yet here in the Viking Age, women and men willingly submit to this chemical assault because blonde hair is not just preferred, it is practically a cultural obsession. You see, the Norse people did not stumble upon their reputation for golden locks by accident. While many Scandinavians were naturally fair-haired, the cultural preference for light hair was so intense that those born with darker shades took matters into their own hands. They bleached, they burned, they transformed themselves through sheer chemical determination. The lye soap worked by opening the hair shaft and stripping away melanin, the pigment that gives hair its colour. Applied regularly, it could take dark brown hair and push it toward reddish blonde or even pale yellow. The process also had a secondary benefit that the Vikings appreciated. It killed head lice. Nothing says beautiful quite like a parasite-free scalp, even if achieving it feels like your head is slowly being dissolved. You move closer to observe the process, and the older woman notices you watching. She does not seem bothered. Beauty rituals here are communal, shared between generations, passed from mother to daughter like precious heirlooms. She explains through gestures and a few words you somehow understand that the mixture must sit long enough to work, but not so long that it damages the hair beyond repair. It is a delicate balance, one that requires experience and careful attention. Get it wrong, and you end up with hair that snaps off like dry straw. Get it right, and you walk away with luminous golden tresses that catch the northern sunlight like spun treasure. The obsession with blonde hair connects to deeper cultural beliefs you begin to understand as you wander through the settlement. The gods themselves were often depicted as fair-haired. Sif, the wife of Thor, possessed hair literally made of gold, crafted by dwarven smiths after Loki cut off her original locks in one of his many acts of mischief. Freya, the goddess of love and beauty, was imagined with flowing blonde hair that shimmered like the wheat fields at harvest. To be blonde was to echo the divine, to carry a piece of the god's beauty in your own mortal form. No wonder people were willing to endure chemical burns for the privilege. But bleaching is only half the story of Viking hair obsession. You notice that nearly every person you pass, regardless of gender or apparent social status, wears their hair in elaborate styles. Braids twist and coil in patterns that seem almost architectural. Some women wear their hair in complex coronets that wrap around their heads like crowns. Others sport long plaits decorated with metal rings, coloured threads, or small beads that click softly as they move. Men are no different. Their beards are braided, their long hair pulled back in intricate knots that keep it from their faces during work or battle. These styles are not mere fashion statements. You realise quickly that hair communicates everything here. The young unmarried woman might wear her hair loose or in simple styles, signalling her availability. A married woman often covers her hair partially or wears it up, indicating her changed status. The complexity and decoration of braids can indicate wealth, with richer women sporting more elaborate arrangements and finer ornaments. Even the way hair is parted or arranged can signal regional origin, family allegiance, or social rank. You're essentially walking through a world where everyone's biography is written on the head. You pause at a merchant's stall and notice something that surprises you. Combs, dozens of them, crafted with obvious care from bone, antler, and occasionally wood. Some are simple and functional, while others feature carved decorations, interlacing patterns, animal motifs, geometric designs that seem almost hypnotic in their complexity. The merchant notices your interest and holds up a particularly fine specimen, running his thumb across the teeth with evident pride. This is not some throwaway grooming tool. This is craftsmanship. This is art. The importance of combs in Viking society cannot be overstated. Archaeologists have found them in graves across Scandinavia, buried alongside weapons, jewellery, and other treasured possessions. These were not forgotten toiletries left accidentally in pockets. They were deliberately placed with the dead, suggesting that proper grooming mattered even in the afterlife. What would the gods think of a newcomer to Valhalla who arrived with tangled, unkempt hair? Apparently the Vikings were not willing to find out. You handle one of the combs, feeling the smooth surface worn by years of use. The teeth are closely spaced on one side for fine work, wider on the other for detangling. This dual-sided design was standard, practical, and remarkably similar to combs still made today. The Vikings, for all their reputation as wild raiders, were surprisingly fastidious about personal grooming. Their enemies often complained about it. One Arabic traveller named Ibn Fadlan encountered Vikings along the Volga River and noted their habits with a mixture of fascination and disgust. He described them as the filthiest of God's creatures in some respects, yet also noted their attention to appearance, a contradiction that reveals how complex these people truly were. The sun shifts overhead, and you watch the woman with the lye-treated hair finally rinse the paste away, revealing hair noticeably lighter than before. She runs her fingers through it, checking for damage, and seems satisfied. Her companion begins the long process of drying and styling, sectioning the damp hair for braiding. They will be at this for hours, creating a masterpiece of interwoven strands that will last for days, perhaps longer. Sleep starts tugging at your awareness as you observe this ancient ritual, this patient dedication to beauty that seems both utterly foreign and strangely familiar. The braiding continues behind you as you drift deeper into the settlement, but something else has caught your attention now. A group of young men sit in a loose circle near the water's edge, laughing and passing around a drinking horn. One of them throws his head back in amusement at some joke you cannot quite hear, and that is when you see it. His smile reveals something that makes you stop mid-step and stare with undisguised shock. His front teeth are marked with deliberate horizontal lines, grooves carved directly into the enamel that create a striped pattern across his grin. This is not damage from battle or decay. This is intentional. This is Viking dental modification, and it's far more unsettling than any lie-burnt scalp you witnessed earlier. You edge closer to the group, trying not to seem too obvious in your fascination. Another man turns toward you, perhaps sensing your gaze, and offers a friendly nod. His teeth bear similar markings, 2 or 3 parallel grooves filed into the upper incisors, creating a pattern that looks almost decorative. The lines are precise, evenly spaced, clearly the work of someone with skill and steady hands. You find yourself wondering how exactly one achieves such modifications without modern dental tools, anesthesia, or a strong desire to never eat ice cream again. The answer, you realise with growing discomfort, involves a lot of pain and a surprising amount of trust in whoever holds the filing implement. Archaeological evidence for this practice first emerged in the early 20th century when researchers began examining Viking Age skeletal remains more closely. They discovered that a significant number of male skeletons from Scandinavia displayed these distinctive horizontal grooves, always on the front teeth, always deliberate in their placement. The marks were too regular, too symmetrical to be accidental wear or post-mortem damage. Someone had carved these patterns into living enamel, transforming ordinary teeth into permanent displays of cultural identity or personal achievement. The practice appears concentrated among men, suggesting it may have been connected to warrior status, successful raids, or some rite of passage that modern researchers can only guess at. You watch the men talking and imagine what the procedure must have involved. There would be no numbing agents, no comfortable dental chairs, no soothing music playing in that background. Instead, picture yourself lying back on a wooden bench while someone approaches your open mouth with a small iron file, or perhaps a sharpened piece of bone. They would work slowly, grinding back and forth against the enamel until a visible groove formed. The enamel itself contains no nerves, so the initial filing might be merely uncomfortable rather than agonizing. But go too deep, approach the dentin layer beneath, and suddenly you enter a world of exquisite sensitivity. One slip, one overly enthusiastic stroke, and you would know pain that makes modern dental drills seem like gentle massage. The grooves themselves appear to have been more than mere decoration. Some researchers believe they were filled with pigment, coloured substances that would sit in the carved channels and create vivid contrast against the white enamel. Imagine dark red ochre or deep blue plant dyes packed into those lines, transforming each smile into a display of permanent body art. Others suggest the grooves might have been inlaid with darker materials, though evidence for this remains debated. What is clear is that these modifications were meant to be seen. They were conversation starters, status symbols, perhaps even intimidation tactics. Nothing says you should probably surrender now, quite like a warrior grinning at you with elaborately modified teeth just before battle. You find yourself unconsciously running your tongue across your own smooth, unmodified teeth, grateful for modern beauty standards that do not require dental mutilation. The Vikings, however, would probably find your plain smile rather boring. Where is the artistry? Where is the evidence that you endured something difficult in pursuit of beauty? Their aesthetic values were deeply intertwined with concepts of endurance, toughness, and the willingness to suffer for appearance. Pain was not a deterrent but a feature, a proof of commitment that soft-toothed foreigners could never understand. The practice was not universal across all Viking territories, which tells you something important about regional variation in beauty standards. Skeletal evidence shows concentrations of filed teeth in certain areas, particularly in what is now Sweden, with fewer examples from Norway or Denmark. This suggests the modification may have been associated with specific communities, trading networks, or perhaps particular groups of warriors who shared distinct traditions. Vikings were not a monolithic culture despite how we often imagine them. They were diverse peoples with regional variations in everything from language to religion, to ideas about what made a person beautiful. Some scholars have proposed connections between Viking tooth filing and similar practices observed in other cultures around the world. West African societies practiced dental modification for centuries, as did various groups in Central America and Southeast Asia. Could Viking traders have encountered these traditions during their far-flung voyages and brought the idea home? It is an intriguing possibility, given that Vikings travelled as far as Baghdad, North Africa, and possibly even North America. They were notorious cultural sponges, absorbing and adapting practices from every society they encountered. That elaborate tooth filing might be a borrowed tradition, only adds to its mysterious appeal. The young men by the water eventually notice your lingering presence and wave you over with the easy hospitality that seems common here despite the Vikings' fearsome reputation abroad. One of them offers you the drinking horn and you accept it cautiously, trying not to stare too obviously at his dental work. Up close you can see the grooves more clearly, 3 parallel lines carved with impressive precision, healed and settled into the tooth as if they had always been there. He catches your gaze and grins wider, clearly proud of the modification. In his world, this is attractive, this is desirable, this is the mark of someone who matters. You take a sip from the horn, some kind of fermented honey drink that tastes surprisingly pleasant, and consider the broader implications of what you are witnessing. Modern beauty standards often emphasize the natural, the effortless, the appearance of not trying too hard. We celebrate teeth that are white, straight and unmarked. Orthodontists spend years correcting even minor imperfections. The idea of deliberately carving grooves into healthy enamel seems not just painful, but almost sacrilegious to contemporary sensibilities. Yet here, the opposite holds true. Unmarked teeth are unremarkable, ordinary, the teeth of someone who has not yet earned the right to modification or lacks the courage to undergo the procedure. The sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the settlement. You hand back the drinking horn with a nod of thanks and continue your wandering, but the image of those filed teeth stays with you. You think about all the ways humans have modified their bodies throughout history in pursuit of culturally defined beauty. Bound feet in China, elongated necks in Myanmar, stretched earlobes across numerous African cultures, and now these grooved Viking grins. Each practice seems bizarre or even horrifying to outsiders, yet makes perfect sense within its own cultural context. Beauty is never universal. It is always a conversation between individual desire and collective expectation, between what the body is and what the culture demands it become. You pass a woman grinding grain between 2 stones, her movements rhythmic and hypnotic in the fading light. She looks up and smiles at you, and you notice her teeth are smooth, unmodified. The practice seems largely limited to men, at least based on archaeological evidence. Perhaps it connected to warrior identity specifically, a mark of those who raided and fought and needed to project ferocity even in moments of friendliness. Or perhaps women had their own modifications that left no trace on bone, decorations of soft tissue that vanished with time and left only mystery behind. Your feet carry you onward through the settlement as evening approaches, past longhouses glowing with interior firelight, past children being called inside for meals, past the eternal sounds of a community settling into nighttime rhythms. Those filed teeth have unsettled you in a way the lie-burned hair did not, perhaps because teeth feel so fundamental, so unchangeable. To carve them deliberately speaks to a relationship with the body that modern people have largely lost, a willingness to endure permanent transformation in pursuit of cultural belonging. The evening light shifts into something golden and soft as you continue through the settlement, and you find yourself drawn toward a longhouse where several people have gathered near the entrance. A woman sits on a low bench while another stands behind her, working on something you cannot quite see from your current angle. You drift closer, curiosity pulling you forward, and what you witness makes you pause with fresh surprise. The standing woman holds a small stick or applicator, carefully lining the seated woman's eyes with a dark substance that transforms her gaze into something striking, almost hypnotic. This is makeup. This is cosmetics. This is Viking beauty culture extending far beyond hair and teeth into territory that feels unexpectedly modern. You settle onto a nearby log to watch without intruding, and the scene before you challenges every assumption you might have carried into this world. The dark substance being applied appears to be coal, a pigment made from soot, ash, or crushed minerals mixed with animal fat or other binding agents. The application is careful, deliberate, rimming both the upper and lower lash lines to create definition that makes the woman's pale eyes stand out dramatically against her fair skin. When she finally opens her eyes fully and turns toward the firelight, the effect is genuinely striking. She looks intense, beautiful, and slightly otherworldly in a way that would not seem out of place on a modern fashion runway. The use of eye makeup among Vikings surprises many people who imagine these Norse peoples as purely practical, concerned only with survival and raiding rather than aesthetic refinement. Yet the historical and archaeological evidence tells a different story. Arab travellers who encountered Vikings during the medieval period noted their use of eye cosmetics, sometimes with admiration, and sometimes with the faint bewilderment of outsiders observing unfamiliar customs. The practice was not limited to women either. You watch as a man approaches the group and soon he too sits for application, dark kohl lining his eyes without anyone seeming to find this unusual. In Viking culture, beauty belonged to everyone. The reasons for wearing kohl extended beyond mere aesthetics, though the beauty benefits were certainly appreciated. The dark pigment helped reduce glare from sunlight reflecting off water and snow, functioning almost like primitive sunglasses for people who spent their lives on bright fjords and winter landscapes. Sailors in particular benefited from this practical application, able to scan horizons without squinting painfully into reflected light. The kohl may also have offered some protection against eye infections, depending on its ingredients. Certain mineral compounds possess antimicrobial properties that ancient peoples discovered through trial and error long before modern science explained why they worked. You think back to that caustic lye soap burning scalps earlier today and realise Viking beauty culture operates on multiple levels simultaneously. These people want to look good, certainly, but they also want their beauty practices to serve practical purposes whenever possible. The kohl protects eyes while making them beautiful. The lye kills lice while bleaching hair blonde. Even the elaborate braiding keeps hair controlled during physical labour or combat, while signalling social status. Nothing is purely decorative in this world. Everything serves double duty. Beauty married to function in ways that actually make more sense than many modern cosmetic practices. The woman with freshly lined eyes stands and stretches, and you notice something else about her appearance that hasn't been nagging at your awareness since you arrived in this settlement. Her skin is remarkably pale, almost luminously so, without the tan that prolonged outdoor work might produce. This is not accidental. This is cultivated. In Viking society, pale skin was prized as a mark of beauty, associated with youth, health, and perhaps higher social status. Those who worked outdoors in fields or on fishing boats inevitably darkened from sun exposure, while those with the luxury of shade maintained the pallor that culture deemed most attractive. The preference for pale skin led to various practices aimed at protecting and enhancing natural fairness. Women might use plant-based treatments to lighten their complexions, or simply avoid direct sunlight whenever possible. Some evidence suggests the use of white lead compounds as skin lighteners, though this practice was more common in other medieval European cultures and came with devastating health consequences that Vikings may have been wise enough to avoid. More likely, they relied on gentler botanical preparations, perhaps birch bark extracts or other native plants known for their skin-brightening properties. You watch another woman approach the cosmetics gathering, her face flushed from some recent exertion, and notice how she immediately seeks shade beneath the longhouse eaves. She pulls a cloth over her head, protecting her face from the lingering evening sun with the automatic gesture of long habit. In her world, a tan is not the mark of healthy vacation time. It is the mark of labouring classes, of those who have no choice but to work under open skies. Beauty means remaining untouched by that relentless northern sun, keeping skin as pale and smooth as fresh cream. The irony is not lost on you. Modern Western beauty standards often celebrate the golden tan, the sun-kissed glow, the appearance of someone who has just returned from a beach holiday. Tanning salons proliferate in cities worldwide, and self-tanning products generate billions in annual revenue. Meanwhile, in other contemporary cultures and certainly throughout much of history, the opposite held true. Pale skin signified wealth, leisure, and freedom from a manual labour. The Vikings would look at a modern tanning enthusiast with complete bewilderment, wondering why anyone would deliberately make themselves appear lower class. Beyond eye makeup and skin pallor, you begin to notice other subtle cosmetic touches as you observe the gathered group. Some women have reddened their cheeks, though whether through pinching, plant-based stains, or other methods you cannot quite determine. Lips seem slightly enhanced on a few faces, perhaps touched with berry-based tints that fade quickly but add temporary colour. The overall effect is what modern makeup artists might call an enhanced natural look, beauty that appears effortless, but actually requires considerable effort to achieve. The men participating in these beauty rituals interest you particularly because they challenge modern assumptions about gendered cosmetic practices. Here, a warrior who might have filed grooves into his teeth to appear fierce thinks nothing of lining his eyes with a dark kohl to appear beautiful. These categories do not conflict in Viking culture the way they might in some modern contexts. Masculinity and aesthetic care exist comfortably side by side, and no one questions whether a man should want to look attractive. Of course he should. Why would anyone choose to be ugly when beauty is achievable? You remember those combs you saw earlier at the merchant's stall, crafted with such obvious care and pride? You think about the hours spent bleaching and braiding hair, the permanent commitment of filing teeth, and now this careful application of eye makeup as evening descends. The Vikings are emerging in your mind as people almost obsessed with personal appearance, far more concerned with beauty than their berserker reputation might suggest. They are vain in the most human way possible, wanting to look good for themselves and others, willing to invest time and endure discomfort in pursuit of their culture's aesthetic ideals. The firelight grows stronger as darkness settles over the settlement, and the coal-lined eyes around you seem to glow with reflected flames. Someone begins singing softly, a tune in a language you almost understand, and the gathered group relaxes into evening rhythms. The woman who first caught your attention meets your gaze across the fire, her enhanced eyes startling in their intensity, and offers a small smile of acknowledgement. In this light, with the shadows playing across her pale features and the dark lines framing her gaze, she looks like something from a dream or a saga, a figure of beauty shaped by cultural forces you're only beginning to comprehend. You think about how every society develops its own definition of attractiveness, its own practices for achieving the look it values, its own willingness to endure discomfort in pursuit of aesthetic ideals. The Vikings are not so different from anyone else in this fundamental human impulse. They simply express it through different methods, different substances, different modifications. The lye and the coal and the filed teeth all serve the same underlying purpose that modern makeup and fashion and cosmetic procedures serve. They transform the raw material of the human body into something culturally meaningful, something that communicates belonging and aspiration, and the endless human desire to be seen as beautiful. The singing continues as you settle more comfortably against the log, letting the warmth of the fire chase away the evening chill. Your eyes feel heavy, but you are not ready to sleep just yet. The fire crackles and pops as someone adds another log, sending sparks spiraling upward into the darkness like tiny orange stars. The singing has faded into comfortable conversation, and you take this moment to really observe the bodies around you, the physical forms that Viking culture is shaped through expectation and labour and deliberate cultivation. What you notice challenges the mental image you might have carried into this world. These are not the lean, delicate figures that certain eras of modern fashion have celebrated. These are substantial people, muscular and tall, built for the demanding lives they lead and valued precisely because of that powerful construction. A man stands to fetch more drink, and you find yourself staring at his physique with something approaching awe. His shoulders are broad, his arms thick with muscle developed through years of rowing, building, fighting, and farming. His height puts him well above what you might expect from ancient peoples, standing perhaps 6 feet tall in an era when such stature was less common than it would become in well-nourished modern populations. He moves with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his body, someone whose physical form has always met and exceeded the expectations of his culture. In Viking society, this man is beautiful. His strength is his attractiveness. You glance around and realize this body type is not unusual here. The men are broadly built, their muscles visible beneath simple tunics, their postures suggesting coiled power ready for deployment at any moment. But what surprises you more is that the women share many of these characteristics. They are not the willowy, fragile figures that later European beauty standards would celebrate. They are strong, capable, and unapologetically substantial. The woman who smiled at you earlier possesses arms that could clearly handle heavy work, shoulders that suggest regular physical labour, and a height that nearly matches some of the men around her. She's beautiful by her culture's standards, precisely because she looks capable of survival. The Viking ideal body served practical purposes that made perfect sense in their harsh northern world. A weak person was a liability, someone who could not contribute to the endless work of staying alive in an environment that offered no easy living. Every pair of hands needed to row longships across treacherous seas, work fields in the brief growing season, build and repair structures against punishing winters, and potentially fight off enemies who might appear at any moment. Beauty that celebrated fragility would have been not just impractical, but almost suicidal in this context. Strength was survival, and survival was beautiful. Archaeological evidence supports this picture of robust Viking physiques. Skeletal remains from the Viking Age show populations that were generally taller and more heavily built than many of their European contemporaries. This physical advantage likely stemmed from relatively good nutrition. A diet rich in fish, dairy, and meat provided protein that supported muscle development and bone growth. The Vikings were not starving peasants eking out marginal existences. They were well-fed people whose bodies reflected the relative abundance of their homelands and the physical demands of their lifestyle. The expectation of strength applied to women as fully as to men, though it expressed itself differently across gendered work divisions. A Viking woman needed powerful arms for grinding grain, churning butter, weaving heavy fabrics, and managing livestock. She needed endurance for the ceaseless domestic labour that kept households functioning. She needed the physical resilience to bear children in an era without modern medical intervention, and to continue working through conditions that would put most modern people in bed for weeks. The strong female body was not just tolerated in Viking culture, it was actively desired, celebrated, and considered essential to any woman worth marrying. You think about modern fitness culture and its complicated relationship with female strength. Today, muscular women often face criticism for being too bulky, too masculine, too far from the slim ideal that dominates fashion and media. The Vikings would find this attitude utterly baffling. Why would anyone prefer a woman who could not pull her weight literally and figuratively in the endless work of survival? Their beauty standards emerged from a world where usefulness and attractiveness were inseparable, where the body you admired was the body that could help you stay alive. As you ponder these physical ideals, your attention shifts to something else you've been noticing without quite registering. Some of the men bear marks on their skin that go beyond the occasional scar from work or combat. These marks appear deliberate, patterned, created with intention rather than accident. You move slightly closer to the fire, trying to get a better look at one man whose arms display what appear to be dark designs winding from wrist to shoulder. The firelight makes it difficult to see clearly, but the patterns seem too regular, too artistic to be random injuries. These could be tattoos. These could be permanent body modifications that would indeed shock modern sensibilities with their boldness and commitment. The evidence for Viking tattooing remains frustratingly incomplete, preserved mainly in one famous account from an Arab traveller named Ibn Fadlan, who encountered Vikings along the Volga River in the early 10th century. He described seeing men covered from neck to fingertips with dark blue or dark green figures depicting trees, symbols, and other designs. His account suggests elaborate full-body coverage, tattooing on a scale that would turn heads even in heavily inked modern sitters. If his observations were accurate, some Vikings transformed their entire bodies into canvases for permanent art. The designs Ibn Fadlan described sound almost mystical, trees that might represent Yggdrasil, the world tree of Norse mythology, alongside other figures whose meanings can only be guessed at centuries later. Tattoos in Viking culture likely carried deep significance, connecting the wearer to religious beliefs, family lineages, important life events, or achievements in battle. They were not casual decorations, but meaningful marks that told stories to anyone literate in their symbolism. A heavily tattooed Viking warrior must have been a walking autobiography, his entire history readable on his skin by those who knew how to interpret the designs. The method of applying these tattoos would have been considerably more painful than modern electric needle techniques. Viking tattoo artists probably used hand-poked methods, puncturing the skin repeatedly with bone or metal needles while rubbing ash, plant-based dyes or other pigments into the wounds. The process would have been slow, bloody, and intensely uncomfortable, requiring either significant pain tolerance or perhaps some herbal assistance to make the experience bearable. Each session would have left the skin raw and vulnerable to infection, making successful large-scale tattoos genuine achievements of endurance. Beyond tattoos, some evidence suggests Vikings may have practiced scarification, deliberately creating raised scars in decorative patterns. This type of body modification appears in cultures worldwide and could certainly have existed among Norse peoples, though the evidence is more speculative than for tattooing. Scarification involves cutting or burning the skin in controlled patterns, then interfering with the healing process to encourage raised scar tissue to form. The results are permanent, textured designs that can be felt as well as seen. If Vikings practiced this art, they were literally sculpting their skin into new forms, reshaping the body's surface into something culturally meaningful. You watch the tattooed man laugh at something a companion says, his marked arms gesturing expressively in the firelight. Whatever meanings those designs carry, they're clearly sources of pride rather than shame. He does not hide them under long sleeves or apologize for their boldness. In his world, such permanent modifications are beautiful, desirable, worth the pain and risk of their creation. Modern people might cringe at the thought of hand-poked tattoos covering their entire arms, but modern people were not raised in a culture that celebrated such marks as essential expressions of identity and belonging. The height factor continues to impress you as more people move around the gathering. You keep having to look up to meet eyes, keep feeling slightly small in this crowd of tall, strong bodies. Norse genetics certainly played a role, but so did nutrition, and perhaps selective preference over generations. If tall partners were consistently preferred, their offspring would trend taller over time. The Vikings you see around you are the products of centuries of such preferences, their impressive statures reflecting accumulated cultural choices as much as random genetic inheritance. A child runs past, chased by a slightly older sibling, both of them already showing the sturdy builds that will develop into adult Viking physiques. They are being raised on the same protein-rich diet, subjected to the same physical demands, shaped by the same expectations that produced their parents. In a few years, that boy might sit for his first tattoo, enduring the needle in patient silence, to emerge marked as an adult, beautiful by his culture's demanding standards. The night has grown deeper now, and you feel the pull of exhaustion beginning to work on your consciousness. But there is one more aspect of Viking beauty culture you need to witness before this journey ends. You follow the sounds of splashing water and laughter coming from behind the longhouses, where steam rises into the cold night air like ghostly fingers reaching toward the stars. What you discover there makes you stop and reconsider everything you thought you knew about medieval hygiene. This is a bathhouse, a dedicated structure for communal bathing, and it is busy even at this late hour with people who apparently consider cleanliness not just important, but essential to their identity. You peer through the doorway and see naked bodies moving through steam, pouring water over hot stones to create more vapour, scrubbing themselves with bundles of birch twigs that must sting as much as they clean. The Saturday bath was sacred in Viking culture, so important that they named the day itself after washing, Lagardega, literally washing day, which evolved into the modern Scandinavian word for Saturday. While much of medieval Europe would spend centuries avoiding regular bathing, convinced it was unhealthy or morally suspicious, the Vikings were soaking, sweating and scrubbing themselves religiously every single week. The contrast could not be more stark. You recall learning about medieval European nobles who bathed perhaps twice a year, who covered body odour with heavy perfumes rather than washing it away, who genuinely believed that dirt formed a protective layer against disease. Meanwhile, here in the supposedly barbaric north, you watch Vikings of all social classes engaging in hygiene practices that would not seem out of place in a modern spa. They're not just washing for cleanliness either. This is a social ritual, a time for conversation and bonding and the kind of communal nakedness that later Christian Europe would find absolutely scandalous. A woman emerges from the bathhouse, her skin pink from heat and scrubbing, her wet hair plastered against her head. She carries a small leather pouch that she opens once she's dressed, pulling out what looks like a tiny spoon. No, not a spoon, an ear scoop, a specialised grooming tool designed specifically for removing earwax. She sits on a bench and carefully cleans her ears with the practiced motion of someone who has performed this ritual countless times. The Vikings had specialised tools for every aspect of personal hygiene, carrying grooming kits that would put many modern travellers to shame. These grooming kits, found in graves throughout Scandinavia, reveal an almost obsessive attention to cleanliness and appearance. They typically contained tweezers for plucking unwanted hair, razors for shaving, the aforementioned ear scoops for oral hygiene, tiny scissors for precision trimming, and sometimes even toothpicks for dental care. These were not crude, purely functional items either. Many featured decorative elements, intricate metalwork and careful craftsmanship that suggested their owners took pride in their grooming tools. Your Viking warrior who filed grooves into his teeth and tattooed his arms also carried a delicate pair of tweezers for keeping his eyebrows properly shaped. The importance of these tools extended beyond mere vanity. Vikings who travelled for trade or raiding needed to maintain their appearance even far from home. They had reputations to uphold, after all. Chronicles from across Europe mention the unusual cleanliness of Viking raiders, their well-groomed beards, their apparent lack of the lice and fleas that plagued most medieval populations. English writers complained particularly bitterly that Viking men in the Danelaw region of England were stealing all the good Anglo-Saxon women with their irritating habits of bathing weekly and combing their hair daily. Imagine being so clean that it was considered a form of unfair competition in the dating market. You notice a man sitting near the bathhouse exit, carefully trimming his beard with a pair of small iron scissors. His friend holds a polished piece of metal, a primitive mirror, so he can see what he's doing. The beard is already impressive, reaching halfway down his chest, but apparently it requires constant maintenance to keep its shape. He trims stray hairs with the patience of a topiary artist, occasionally pausing to run his fingers through the length, checking for tangles or inconsistencies. This is not a quick trim before rushing out the door. This is an investment of time that speaks to the beard's importance in Viking masculine identity. Beards were so central to Viking culture that having one forcibly shaved was considered a grave insult, sometimes worthy of violent retaliation. Laws existed specifically addressing beard pulling as a form of assault. To grab another man's beard was to challenge not just his person but his very manhood, his place in society, his fundamental identity. The beard represented maturity, wisdom and masculine power. To be beardless as an adult man was to be somehow incomplete, not fully realised as a person. No wonder they spent so much time grooming these facial forests into perfection. The bathing and grooming practices extended to hair washing with surprising sophistication. The Vikings did not just rinse their hair with water and call it clean. They used various substances as primitive shampoos, soapwort plants that created natural lather, ash-based lies that cut through grease, and eggs that provided protein to strengthen hair shafts. They understood that different hair types needed different treatments, that the bleached hair resulting from lye treatments required extra care to prevent breakage, that regular washing prevented the scalp conditions that could lead to hair loss. You remember that Arab traveller Ibn Fadlan who described Viking tattoos also had much to say about their washing habits, though his account was notably less flattering than what you observe here. He described Vikings sharing wash basins in ways he found disgusting, passing the same water between multiple people. But his critique must be understood in context. He came from a culture with very different ideas about hygiene, where running water was preferred and communal washing was viewed with suspicion. What he saw as filthy, the Vikings saw as practical and socially bonding. Hygiene, like beauty, is culturally defined. A young couple emerges from the bathhouse together, their faces glowing with heat and cleanliness. She carries a comb that she immediately begins running through his long hair, working out the tangles while it is still damp and manageable. He sits patiently while she works, occasionally wincing when she encounters a particularly stubborn knot. This intimate grooming between partners was common, a form of care and bonding that went beyond mere maintenance. To groom someone else's hair was an act of love, trust, and social connection. In a world without professional salons, everyone depended on family and friends for the beauty treatments that required another pair of hands. The ear scoop catches your attention again as more people produce these tiny implements from their personal belongings. The Vikings were apparently very concerned about ear cleanliness, enough to craft specialized tools just for this purpose. These were not improvised items, but carefully designed instruments with tiny bowls at the end of long handles, perfect for scooping out wax without damaging the delicate ear canal. Some were made from copper alloy, others from silver, and a few expensive examples from gold. Imagine caring so much about clean ears that you commission a golden tool specifically for maintaining them. The night has grown late, and the activity around the bathhouse begins to slow. People drift back toward their homes, clean and groomed and ready for sleep. You realize you have been standing here for longer than intended, mesmerized by this display of Viking vanity that seems so at odds with their fierce reputation. These people who terrorized Europe for centuries spent their Saturday nights in communal bathhouses, trimming their beards with tiny scissors and cleaning their ears with specialized tools. They were warriors and raiders, yes, but they were also human beings who wanted to look good and smell pleasant and feel the satisfaction of clean skin and well-groomed hair. As the last of the bathers disappear into the darkness, you feel the weight of everything you have witnessed today beginning to settle into your consciousness. The lye-burned scalps and elaborate braids, the filed teeth gleaming with possible pigments, the coal-lined eyes and pale skin carefully protected from the sun, the proud display of muscled bodies marked with tattoos, and finally this obsessive attention to hygiene and grooming. The Vikings emerged not as simple barbarians, but as complex people with elaborate beauty cultures that demanded time, pain, and dedication. The settlement has grown quiet now, with only the occasional dog bark or baby's cry breaking the silence. Most of the fires have burned down to embers, leaving pools of darkness between the longhouses. You find yourself alone near the cooling bathhouse, steam still wisping from its doorway like the last breaths of the day's activities. Your body feels heavy, your eyelids beginning to droop despite your fascination with everything you have seen. You think about those modern women mentioned in tonight's title. How shocked they would be by these beauty standards that seem so extreme, so painful, so committed. But then you think about modern beauty culture, the injections and surgeries, the chemical peels and laser treatments, the hours spent in salons and gyms, the fortunes spent on products promising transformation. Are we really so different from these Vikings with their lye and files and tattoo needles? Perhaps every culture finds its own level of acceptable suffering in pursuit of beauty, its own balance between pain and aesthetic reward. The stars wheel overhead in patterns the Vikings knew by different names, navigating by different stories than the ones you learned. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls, its voice carrying across the sleeping settlement like a lullaby meant specifically for you. You can barely keep your eyes open now, the exhaustion of time travel or perhaps just the lateness of the hour finally claiming its due. The wooden wall of the bathhouse is still warm from the earlier activity, and you lean against it, letting that residual heat soak into your travel-weary bones. Tomorrow, these Vikings will wake and return to their beauty rituals. Someone will mix new batches of lye soap, ignoring the chemical burn for the promise of lighter hair. Someone else will sit patiently while a friend files another groove into their teeth, transforming their smile into something unique and marked and culturally meaningful. The kohl will be applied, the beards trimmed, the hair braided into those elaborate patterns that take hours to complete. They will bathe again when Saturday comes, socializing naked in the steam, scrubbing themselves with birch twigs until their skin glows pink and clean. But you will not be here to see it. Already you feel yourself fading from this world, pulled back toward your own time where beauty standards are different but no less demanding. The last thing you see is a shooting star streaking across the Nordic sky, and you wonder if some Viking somewhere is watching it too, making a wish for lighter hair or straighter teeth or clearer skin. Beauty haunts us across all times and places, demanding its tribute in whatever currency each culture accepts. The Vikings paid in pain and patience and lye-burned scalps. We pay in different coins, but the transaction remains remarkably similar. Sleep calls to you now with increasing insistence, and you stop fighting its pull. Let the Viking world fade into dreams. Let their beauty standards become stories you will half remember tomorrow. Let the steam from their bathhouses carry you gently back to your own bed, your own time, your own complicated relationship with whatever your culture has decided is beautiful. Close your eyes and drift, imagining those elaborate braids, those filed teeth, those kohl-lined eyes following you into peaceful slumber where all beauty standards dissolve into the democracy of dreams, where everyone is exactly as attractive as they need to be, and no one needs to burn their scalp with lye to achieve it. Sweet dreams.